Dispatch to 5 Quinn.
This is 5 Quinn, go ahead.
5 Quinn, can I get you to respond to a working structure fire at 18 Main Avenue? That's reported working structure fire at 18 Main Avenue.
5 Quinn, copy. 5 Quinn will be responding to 18 Main Avenue. That's 18 Main Avenue for a report of a working structure fire, code 1.
I had come on in January 7, 1975. This fire was in May of 1978, and it would have been I had a little better than 3 years on. I was still the rookie at that time. It was getting on to midnight. There was smoke all over the south end and central Halifax from the fire. So we were getting calls for the smell of smoke everywhere. We had got a call for the smell of smoke at St. Vincent's Guest House on Windsor Street. Was where we went to. So the fire's already being fought down in the south end. From there, we were called in. They needed a second aerial device, so we were called from the street to go down and run a feed for the snorkel. You could tell it was brick faced. It was all concrete block, and it appeared to be what you could see of it through the smoke was a bow truss roof. We actually went up right into the doorway, one of the big double doorways, but the heat was so intense that we had to back off away from the building again. And there was about maybe a 3.5, 4 foot stone wall on the Lamarchand Street side behind the buildings, which are still there. All them big older homes are still there, because of course that rink didn't take up near the square footage that the new one does, so there was a lot more room between there and the backs of the houses. So when we backed away from the building, we backed our line, 2.5 inch line, down over the wall and made our stand there just beyond the wall. I didn't really hear anything. There's so many other things going on around you. And of course the fact that we've backed away from the building because the heat was so intense, we're now closer to the fire apparatus. So you've got the roar of just everything else that's going on around you in the background. And of course, I'm there, and that was commonplace. What you would do is you make your loop in the line, and then you'd come back, the other firefighter on the nozzle, you come up behind him, and I knelt down, right knee on the line, left shoulder into his back to support him because of the back pressure. So you've got your head down, you're trying to keep from getting any wetter than you have to. So you aren't really watching the scene. He's the one watching the scene. You're somewhat reliant on him, And all I heard him say was, "This is no place for us." He used a couple other adjectives, but I would say, and I see him shut the nozzle off and drop to the ground, start to run. And of course, then even for that split second, what's going on here? And I look up, and the next thing, everything's coming at you. So you stand up, and 3 or 4 running steps backwards, and I'm just buried. It happened that quick.
Yeah.
And don't ever think the thing, you can come in here every day and nothing goes on much, but it can change in a heartbeat.
Really?
The next thing I remember was a guy underneath each armpit hauling me out from underneath the rubble.
Yeah.
And what happened was that the leg that was broken ended up, because we had the big high boots, the boot got hung up underneath the rubble and it came off. Of course, I thought my leg was still inside the boot, because from my knee down, it's like there's nothing, there's no feeling at all.
Wow.
And then they hauled me out, and I was yelling, I guess, that my leg is gone. And someone said, no, it's still there. But when I look down, it's at a complete, where it's broken, at a complete right angle to my body, with the foot just flopped over on its side. So. And the funny part was, years later, I got to speak to one of the ambulance attendants that was on at the VG that night, which would be, 5 or 6 blocks away at the old VG, and they said that they heard the racket that night when the wall collapsed. They got up, actually climbed into the cab of the ambulance, waited for the call. They figured they were getting the call, and they did. I think you're a little more diligent when you're pulling up now. You do a little more of a size up, and that term wasn't really being used back then. I do tend to be a little more leery now when I pull up to something, and I notice myself that, and not that I was rushing into anything, but you can't always rely on your own officer or your safety officer. You've got to be, you're another set of eyes there that's got to be watching out for yourself along with everyone else.
Yeah.
In a way, I was fortunate because there was rubble. The rubble that landed on me also somewhat was teetering on other rubble that come down prior to it, just seconds before, which left me in a bit of a void, other than what I was in fact covered with. Mm-hmm. But had I not got up and even taken a few steps backwards, or had taken time to turn around, I figure I probably wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. It started in September '90, so maybe two years at the time, and stationed in Clayton Park at that time. The older guys would point out things to you, and especially at only 2 years, there wasn't a lot that I had seen yet. I think it came in around 3 or 3:30 in the morning, maybe about 3 in the morning, I can't remember correctly. And you're going to such and such a place for our crush fund, as I remember coming in. We weren't first initial in, that would have been West Street and South End. So once we knew where we were going, we knew we had a confirmed structure fire. When we first pulled up, it was a building typical of downtown Halifax and probably Dartmouth too, an older, style building, probably 100 years old or so. You can tell it was retail in the bottom. We had, I didn't see a lot of flame, because I think they had knocked most of it down what they had saw when they arrived, but there was a lot of heavy smoke in the air. And they had already gone in the front, and we were assigned to go to the back of the building, ladder that, and then go to the roof with a saw, see if we can ventilate. I remember trying to cut through the tar, but after a while the saw kept stalling. Because of heavy smoke coming up, it would stall the saw, so they ordered a saw. As we were coming down the ladder again, myself and Bruce Mosier noticed there was a window there that when we went up, it was clear, but as we were coming down, it was fully involved. So we grabbed the hose line that we had with us, and we were just sweeping the hose line. And I remember Bruce said, "Get a little bit closer." So we were putting the line in and spraying it around. And then that's when the roof let go. And it was the damnedest thing because it was just around me. It was like this little 3x3 hole around me. And Bruce was right off to my side, but it didn't collapse under him. probably a good half a foot of snow at least. And one of the signs they say is watch for melting snow, puddling, things of that nature. But no, the roof was still covered in snow. As far as I know, there was no sponginess or anything.
Yep.
And of course, over the years, a couple of guys have asked me, well, maybe there was a hatch there or something like that collapsed under just your weight because Bruce stayed up. You never know exactly. 100-year-old building, who knows what could have been there. Right?
Yeah.
Next thing I remember is landing on my side, on my right side, and seeing a pile of orange, the flames and what have you. You could make out a few things like store fixtures, shelving, stuff like that had already burned and collapsed. And I jumped up, made my way. I don't know if I had a plan or not, but I made my way away from the flames. And I didn't know this until after, but Bruce had taken the line after the collapse. And he put the line down through the hole and had sprayed to dampen the fire down around. So I got to a spot that was it was still pitch black, couldn't see anything. And I got to a spot, and I actually remember opening my coat up, and I had a little pen light, the little tiny mag lights,
Yeah.
and the 2 cellar ones, enough to maybe read a map by. But I took that out, and I turned that on, and I was, looking around, and I remember hearing the diesels from the engines outside on the street running. And I started making my way towards that sound, and I could hear the odd yell here and there, and I could hear, I thought what was an axe banging here and there. And I got to a certain point, and I could hear voices and commotion and things going on, but I still couldn't see the door or windows. It was that black and smoky. So I had my BA on, of course, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have got that far. And I started yelling and making a lot of noise. And I was that close to the door, I remember, that John Preston, who retired a few years ago, actually took a couple steps in, grabbed a hold of my back, my shoulder, and he guided me out. I mean, I was that close, but you couldn't see it from the smoke and the darkness. So he guided me out, and I found myself on the sidewalk. After I came out, and they sent us over to a nearby building in the lobby to just have a rest and relax for a sec, change our bottles. And all I remember him saying how lucky and things like that were. He was just amazed. So changed our bottles and went right back to work.
Yeah.
So.